welcome to the Bulldog Blitz football radio show presented by Two Hats Ranch. I'm the voice of the Bulldogs, Rob Bentley, along with Sandy Golston as we continue playoff action here in Big Rapids. Ferris State coming off a big win and ready for a big showdown against Harding University in the Super Region 3 championship game this Saturday. And Sandy, what a performance this past weekend by the Bulldogs. Big win over Central Oklahoma here in the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, just an awesome performance by the Bulldogs. Really right from start to finish. And you think of Central Oklahoma coming in, very well-coached program, very accomplished program, winners of the MIAA, and that says a lot right there. And the Bulldogs just really with a superb performance. The way that they ran the ball was just absolutely awesome. The offensive line did a really superb job in terms of handling the line of scrimmage. The defensive line was really good as well. We knew we were playing a really good offense, and everybody just really came in, and we were just clicking. And, there's maybe not any such thing as a perfect game, but the Bulldogs came pretty close to it.
Most points in Ferris State history in terms of a playoff game. The Bulldogs rolling to a 78-17 win over Central Oklahoma, a team that came in with just a single loss on the year, the nation's number one offense, but the Bulldogs really did it in all three phases on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, coming into the game, you knew defensively that was going to be something that the Bulldogs were going to have to really look to perform well against a team that has a lot of weapons offensively, a team that really throws the ball well, multiple quarterbacks, and one of the best wide receivers in the country. They run the ball pretty well, too, when things are really clicking. And so the Bulldogs knew that defensively they had to be ready right from the start. And I think the defense responded pretty well to that. When you think of what they were able to do and what Central Oklahoma came into the game averaging over 40 points a game, Bulldogs hold them to 17. So really strong performance by the Bulldogs defensively.
Of course, we'll talk more about that win here as the show goes on. An abbreviated show today with all that's going on here this week. We got Bulldog basketball, of course, early in the week. We got Ferris State volleyball hosting the Midwest Regional Tournament as the number one team in the country, unbeaten on the year, gets to play postseason at home, kind of like the football team championship weekend coming up here in Big Rapids.
Yeah, it's exciting. I ducked my head into Bulldog Arena a little bit, and definitely has an NCAA tournament feel in there with the net tape and the banners hanging around the arena, and you could just really get that feel that we're getting into NCAA tournament time, and why not? We've talked about the Bulldog football team being number one in the nation, but so is Bulldog volleyball, and now they get an opportunity to keep their season going in NCAA play, and not too many things more exciting than that, especially for the Bulldogs coming off the performance that they had in the regular season, capping it with a regular season and tournament GLIAC championship.
Of course, Ferris State on the football side gets to host Harding University, the defending national champions, coming up on Saturday in the Super Region 3 championship game. 1 o'clock kickoff at Top Taggart Field this Saturday. Of course, we'll have all the pregame coverage for you starting at noon on Sunday 97.3, online at ferrisstatebulldogs.com, and then into game coverage on ESPN Plus as well with our Bulldog Sports Network broadcast on Saturday, a little bit closer to 1 o'clock, 1:02 kickoff officially here on ESPN Plus for the second week in a row for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's exciting. ESPN Plus certainly brings a level of exposure that I think is exciting for the program. And again, we talk about athletics a lot of times being a front porch to the university, and being on ESPN Plus is certainly huge. And for those of us who already have an ESPN Plus subscription, it just, exposure and opportunity to really see the best of the best that D2 has to offer. And I tell you what, when you talk about the best of the best that D2 has to offer, this is a titanic battle between the reigning national champions and the team that won the national championship the 2 years prior. And so the last three national champions represented by these two programs.
Of course, Ferris State winning in 2021, 2022, Harding in 2023. But I heard it mentioned earlier, if you go back even a little bit further, the last 6 winners of this regional field have come between Ferris State and Harding.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when you think of how great the sustained excellence of these programs, and, I was talking to somebody earlier today that, how far the Ferris Harding matches go back. I mean, it was a while ago that we played them, 17 and 18 that we played them. And that's how long ago that was. And since then, both of these programs have been really good, among the best. And obviously, when you think of between the two programs, 3 national championships since then. And so Harding proved that they were for real, and Ferris State's proved it's for real.
Of course, you mentioned the 2017, 2018 games. 2017, I remember that one, a heartbreaker for the Bulldogs in the national quarterfinals right here at Top Taggart Field. Harding gets the ball back with about 9 minutes to go, trailing in the game, and they kick a walk-off field goal to beat the Bulldogs. That just shows what they like to do offensively in terms of chewing up the clock.
And at the risk of belaboring a tough moment for us, so we were coming off of that Fort Hays win, which was a phenomenal win in 17. But they're the kind of ball control team that they can do that to you, and that's something that's going to be a point of emphasis for the Bulldogs. And of course, these two coaches know each other; they've seen each other, and they go back in this series. But that was a ball control game where they were able to work the ball down the field and got into field goal range, and they were able to bang it through. And so that's something the Bulldogs want to make sure that they manage and not allow Harding to be able to have that ball control offense where they can really run time off the clock. Bulldogs want to keep their offense on the field.
Of course, 2018, Ferris State came back the following year, and the Bulldogs jumped out to a 21-0 lead over the Bisons. They came back, though, with 19 points in the fourth quarter, fall just short as Ferris State wins it 21-19, and that ultimately helped Ferris State kind of catapult into a great playoff run and reaching the national championship game for the first time in 2018.
Yeah, what a year that was. And when you think it could have been derailed in that game against Harding, but it wasn't. The Bulldogs were able to hang on it and win that game and really advance into a national championship game that was a great game. Bulldogs unfortunately came up on the short end of a 49-47 shootout to Valdosta State. And so, but that was a great year. And those were some great matchups with Harding. When you look back on those, and two teams that, have a lot of respect for each other, two teams that share some similarities. Bulldogs, of course, throw the ball a lot more than Harding does, but both teams really want to run the ball and control the line of scrimmage.
Of course, this show Wednesday evening here at the Bulldog Blitz on Sunny 97.3 and online at ferrisstatebulldogs.com. We will have a complete media interview from our media session this week as well with head coach Tony Anise, a couple Bulldog players online, so you can follow ferrisstatebulldogs.com for the complete coverage as we will kind of focus in here on this show on the playoff matchup coming up on Saturday. What's going on in Division II football? Just 8 teams left here in the national quarterfinals.
Yeah, it's just whittling down here round by round, Saturday by Saturday, and here we are. And, you start to get deeper into the playoffs, and you're really getting the best of the best. You start off with the best of the best, and it just continues as you pare down and you move closer and closer to where everybody wants to be, and that's in McKinney, Texas, with a chance to play for the national championship.
Of course, a lot of people are saying this is kind of the national championship game between Ferris State and Harding, but the winner still has to move on and play a couple more games against some quality teams that are left here on the field. You really got to take it one game at a time, and I know both of these teams coming into Saturday are not looking ahead. The opponent very good that they're going to face on Saturday.
Yeah, you can't afford to. I mean, these are two programs that have won the whole thing, in terms of national championships. And again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, two well-coached teams, two veteran coaches that know each other really well, and they know what it takes to win championships. And so, they're not looking past anything. They know the importance of this game. And you're right, there is some of that talk that this is kind of the national championship game, but I don't think these two teams are thinking about that at all. I think they're thinking that I think both teams are thinking we have a really good opponent that we're going to have across from us on the field, and we have to take care of business and not worry about what happened the week before or what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, but to focus on what they have to do to beat a great opponent.
Of course, Ferris State enters the game with a record of 11-1. The Bulldogs have won 11 consecutive games since that season-opening setback to Pittsburgh State. Harding, meanwhile, just the one loss on the year. 12-1 coming in. Their lone loss coming to Ouachita Baptist in a rivalry game down in the Great American Conference here back in October.
Yeah, I mean, and they've been on a roll too. And you really look at this matchup, Robin. Arguably the two hottest teams in the country are playing right now. When you look at the way Ferris State played last week in getting a win over Central Oklahoma, a very dominant win over Central Oklahoma. Grand Valley found out how good Harding is. Harding, with a very dominant performance down in Allendale against Grand Valley, pulled away really over the course of the last 3 quarters of that game, and just really pulled away with a dominating win. And I think they only threw the ball once. So they're a really good football team. And again, two of the hottest football teams in the country got to lock horns here at Top Taggart Field.
Should be an exciting one. You can get your tickets online, ferrisstatebulldogs.com/tickets. Parking as well. Had a good crowd this past Saturday as Ferris State defeated Central Oklahoma, despite it being Thanksgiving weekend, despite the snowy weather, the cold conditions. Bulldog fans came out and supported this team, and you could hear them, at least through our crowd noise, cheering on this team to a victory.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there were certainly, as you just demonstrated, there were a lot of factors that could have prompted people to stay at home, and wider exposure on TV, the cold, which it was cold. I mean, we were fortunate to be in the booth, but it was cold out there, and some snow flurries, and you mentioned the holiday weekend, and certainly a lot of reasons not to come out. But we had a lot of the Bulldog fans that really came out and supported, and every little bit helps when you're playing in a playoff game like that against a team like Central Oklahoma. You're coming in and expecting a really strong game, and every little bit of fan support helps.
One of 8 teams left here in the field is Ferris State, and the Bulldogs, with the exception of last year, you go back all the way to 2016. They've been not only one of the national quarterfinal teams, but one of the teams left in the GLIAC, the only team left in the GLIAC here at this stage, with the exception of last year.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how tough it gets as you move along into playoffs, and of course, not the outcome by any stretch that the Bulldogs wanted last season with an early exit by the standards that Ferris State has set for itself. But here they are right now in the Final 8 and looking to advance. And this is where you want to be. And the Bulldogs have earned their way into this position to have an opportunity to host this team. And that's the good news. The bad news is you get a really good, or the tough news, the challenging news, is you get a really good Harding team that comes in here. And that's life in Super Region 3. I mean, you're going to play somebody good every night in Super Region 3.
Of course, last year the Bulldogs eliminated in the first round by Grand Valley State, but a lot of guys left on this team that were here in 2022, maybe before, that were part of those national championship teams. Really felt like last week that playoff experience, playing in some crappy weather here in the playoffs, really helped this Ferris State team. They were up to the challenge against Central Oklahoma, a team that was making its first playoff appearance since 2003.
Yeah, not only with the weather and not only taking on a team that runs a really challenging offense to face in terms of the aerial attack that we knew Central Oklahoma was coming in here to face. But, coming off a bye week, and obviously bye week is good. It gives you an opportunity to rest up some things, get some treatment for some players, and to heal up a little bit when you're this deep into the season, you're playing into December. That was good. But I think you're right. I think the Bulldogs were able to call on some of that experience and guys that have been around, guys that have won a couple of national championships, that have been to the highest level of D2. They were able to come out and play a really strong game coming off of a bye week against a very good opponent.
Ferris State coming into this game on Saturday. The Bulldogs appear to be pretty healthy. Did not see any major injuries last week during that game against Central Oklahoma. And that was kind of nice to see with the weather the way it was to really come out of there. The Bulldogs had a chance late in the game to really get everyone into the playing mix, at least in terms of the guys that were able to suit up on the 58-man roster here in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see a lot of those points put up, and the long touchdown runs, and a lot of what the Bulldogs scored were off of long run plays, and so that's obviously a testament to not only great backs, but also great blocking downfield, great blocking on the line of scrimmage. But getting that lead as big as it was, early as it was, I think you're right. It allowed the Bulldogs to work some guys into the lineup, and there really wasn't any drop off when the Bulldogs worked guys into the lineup, and the guys that came in off the bench, if you will, they came in and really continued to perform at a high level. I know that had to be really gratifying for Coach Anise and the staff.
So we kind of look back at last week's game. Central Oklahoma got off to a great start, moved the ball well on the Bulldog defense. Their opening 3 possessions, missed the field goal to start the ball game on the opening drive. Ferris State comes down and scores right away to take the early lead, but they came back. They tie it back up, and then they get the go-ahead field goal to start the second quarter. And from there, the game really changed. I thought it started really with the Bulldogs forcing that turnover, getting the stop, and then forcing the turnover. And from there, the offense really picked it up for Ferris State and made the plays they had to make.
Yeah, I think early in the game, up to a point in the first quarter in particular, it had the feel like it was going to be a shootout. Like we were going to go back up and down the field, and they would score, and we would score, and they would score, and we would score. But I think there was a point where the Bulldogs really turned the corner defensively, and I think they kind of adjusted to what Central Oklahoma was doing. And when the Bulldog defense really hit its stride, and you start to get a few stops, and we turned them over a little bit. Well, a lot maybe when you look at the final stats. And I think getting those stops and then getting those turnovers, putting the Bulldogs on a short porch to be able to score more points, I think was really helpful in really setting the tone for the rest of the game. And that defense never let up.
Of course, the defense, a couple of interceptions. Justin Payout had an interception. Sefasaipa-Ia. Bulldogs recovered a couple fumbles. I know Coach Anise, I had a chance to speak with him the other day on the Ferris Sports Update TV show. He referenced the special teams plays. Jarek Fields, I think, had a block punt for the Bulldogs. Of course, they had the miscue on the Central Oklahoma punt late in the game where they kicked the ball out of the end zone. So really finding ways to score in all 3 phases and really making plays in all 3 phases of the game.
Yeah, when you expect and you train and you prepare for greatness in all three phases. And you and I go to a lot of practices over the course of the season, and we see a lot of that up close and personal. And you see the work that's put in all three phases, and particularly with special teams, little things can make a difference. You mentioned the safety and getting pressure on there and forcing the punter, to kick the ball out of the end zone for safety. And I mean, that's a really special play right there. And we saw that the Bulldogs can be a very dangerous team in the return game. The Bulldogs are very good in kickoff and punt coverage as well. And so those are things that really can make a difference because, kickoffs, punts, you get a big play in that, it changes the field position dramatically. The Bulldogs punted pretty well also. So just a great job all the way around in all three phases for the Bulldogs.
Of course, about midway through the Bulldog Blitz football radio show this week, presented by Two Hats Ranch. Thanks to all of our sponsors here of Ferris State Athletics action on the Bulldog Sports Network. Time to talk about the Division II playoffs. 8 teams remaining. Let's go back and look at this past week's games. We'll start out in Super Region 1, where Kutztown and Slippery Rock were battling it out. Couple conference rivals, and Slippery Rock won a close one, 25-24 in overtime. I think that was the game that featured the hook and ladder play at the end of the game that showed up on social media, on SportsCenter, and some other locations.
Yeah, that was a well-drawn play right there, a 2-point conversion to be able to win that, and that was a pretty spectacular play. And, that's one of the tough things, Rob, about the way that Division II is set up is that you can get a quick rematch with a rival. And that's really tough, for Kutztown to have to look over there and see Slippery Rock, a team that's licking its chops to get back at them. And boy, they did. What a great win for Slippery Rock.
Of course, Slippery Rock will have another conference rival on the docket this week. The national quarterfinals, California, Pennsylvania advanced as they move on with a 34-33 win over Ashland University. And Ashland had a lead in that game, but Cal PA comes back and gets the win to eliminate the Eagles in the second round.
Yeah, shout out to Ashland. We talked about it. That was a team that people wrote off after they started out 0-2, losses to IUP, losses to Ferris State, a decisive loss to Ferris State. And we said, hey, watch this team. The pieces are there for them to do something special. And they did. They come back. They win the GMAC. They get a win over Charleston in the first round of the playoffs, and they push California right to the edge. But give California credit coming away with a big win, hard-fought win indeed for them, and sets up what should be a great matchup with Slippery Rock.
Of course, moving on to Super Region 2, Valdosta State, the number 1 seed out in Super Region 2. They advanced. They defeated Miles by a score of 33-17. So Valdosta State, one of the 2 number 1 seeds that are still left in the field, along with Ferris State, of course. And they will draw Virginia Union, which got an impressive win, 44-12 over Lenore-Rhine in round number 2. So Virginia Union back here into the national quarterfinals. I think they're one of the only schools from their conference that's ever made it this far in the national tournament.
Yeah, they're a very dominant win over Lenore-Rhine, and I think the margin certainly a little bit surprising that they were able to be that dominant in that win over Lenore-Rhine to set them up to move and advance into the tournament. And Valdosta with a big win over Miles. Miles was a team probably halfway to 3/4 of the way through the season, became kind of a popular team around the nation as people started to recognize what they were doing and how they were coming on. And they ran into a Valdosta team that has been up or near or at the top of the rankings for most of the season, but people haven't been talking about them quite as much. But impressive win for Valdosta.
Virginia Union, you think of them, I think back to the days when they were a pretty big basketball powerhouse in Division II, going back all the way to the 1990s.
Yeah, big. They had some great teams in basketball. Some great players have come out of there. Charles Oakley, Ben Wallace, there are some great players that have come out of there. But now they're saying, hey, you know what? We play a little football at Virginia Union too.
Of course, we'll move on to Super Region 4 before we get to Super Region 3. Minnesota State continues to move along here in the national tournament again as they defeated Colorado State Pueblo on the road, the top seed. They win it 26-23. The Mavericks back in the national quarterfinals, and they're one of those teams traditionally that makes some deep runs here in the playoffs.
Yeah, they have, and that's a team that we certainly remember from a while back when we played them. And we remember a very cold day that we were out there in Mankato, Minnesota, and they've and their program has been able to stay up, pretty up close or near close to that level. And so, and we know that Minnesota State in many other sports is very good in hockey, and of course their national championship success in men's and women's basketball. And so football says, why not us too?
Of course, they will draw a rematch as well as Bemidji State wins again. Bemidji State, a couple road wins here in the Division II playoffs, as did Minnesota State. Bemidji State scores a big win over Western Colorado, 20-19. So a couple of the Northern Sun schools knock out a couple of the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some interesting matchups there for sure. And, it's you get to the playoffs and just anything can really happen. But great job there by Bemidji. We looked at the RMAC, and they had a history of really advancing deep into the playoffs. Of course, Colorado School of Mines had played in a couple of national championship games and ran into some little bit of tough times this year with some of the competition that's really stepped up this year. But, give credit to, it's funny when the regions realign, it's going to be interesting to see how it comes, but we could be seeing a little bit more of Minnesota State and Bemidji.
Of course, as we move on to Super Region 3, our home region here, including the Ferris State Bulldogs. The Bulldogs got a big 78-17 win, as we mentioned, over Central Oklahoma. Got to give a shout out to a couple Bulldogs. Woke up Sunday morning and saw that they got helmet stickers on ESPN. Trinidad Chambliss and Cannon Katz are both near 200 yards rushing in the contest. So tremendous to see their names get recognized on ESPN.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome to see that. And why not? Just two incredible performances, just with some eye-popping numbers and some eye-popping plays that we saw that really caught a lot of attention there. And it's really great to see that. We got to see if we can get them a helmet, though, so they can put the sticker back on the helmet.
I think both of those guys would be the first to kind of give credit to their offensive line for sure. Helping them and the receivers. I thought the Bulldog receivers did an outstanding job, as always, really, in the running game.
Yeah, I think whenever you have really long runs like we saw, particularly Rob from Cannon. Cannon had some really long runs, and it's really tough to get long runs like that without some blocking downfield from some key players. And, and I think in Cannon and Trinidad have always been quick to credit their offensive line. And you look at almost any time those guys have been quoted, they have given a ton of credit to their offensive line.
That offensive line really controlled the line of scrimmage. I think we saw it even when Cannon maybe left the game in the second half, and the Bulldogs went to Zach Ahern. James Kobe scored a touchdown. They really continued that dominant play with some other backs out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, speaking of long runs, Zach Ahern had a really long run as well. And again, you just don't do that without great blocking, not only at the point of attack on the line of scrimmage, but also downfield with your wide receivers, your slot receivers doing a great job of throwing some blocks and opening those plays up. And of course, you got to have the athletes to be able to make those runs, and the Bulldogs certainly have those. But teamwork makes the dream work, so yeah.
Of course, the other matchup included Harding, which will be the opponent this week. Harding scores a 44-26 win over Grand Valley State down at Lubber Stadium in Allendale. Not sure the game was maybe that close, but Harding ends up winning it over GVSU. Ran for nearly 500 yards again with their rushing attack. Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of a classic Harding win, to go on the road. And we always say, and this is one of the reasons that Ferris State has been successful over the years as well, defense and running, they travel well. When you're loading up the plane or you're loading up the buses, you bring your defense and you bring your running game, and you got a chance to win. And that's what Harding showed. Harding plays really good defense, and obviously they don't throw the ball very much. But when they do throw the ball, a lot of times it's a really huge play when they do throw the ball. So you got to always be alert. But they really ran the ball the way that they needed to on the road, and they did a good job of controlling the line of scrimmage, as Harding teams typically do. And so they get a big win over the Lakers in Allendale. Of course, we had cold weather, snowy weather. I'm not sure we had as much snow as they did down in Allendale, and Harding really adjusted to that well. So don't expect weather to be a factor here in the Saturday's game. No, it won't be a factor, mainly because of the style of play of Harding and the fact that they want to run the ball, and they're comfortable with that. And they obviously showed that down at Lubber Stadium. They were able to keep their footing, and I don't know. There was more snow, so maybe the field wasn't quite as slick. Maybe it might have been a little bit slicker in Big Rapids, but certainly more snow down in Allendale. But I'm not sure it really matters. I mean, that's a Harding team that's they have an identity, they have a style of play, and like the Bulldogs, they execute that style of play really well. Of course, you're in tune to the Bulldog Blitz football radio show presented by Two Hats Ranch as we talk about this Saturday's matchup between Ferris State and Harding, the national quarterfinals. The winner moves on to the national semifinals, and we would expect if Ferris State could get past Harding, the Bulldogs would play host to a national semifinal the following week. You never know. Harding may have a chance as well if they get the win over the Bulldogs. So both teams are really with a lot on the line, and it comes down to really a big game on Saturday between these two programs.
Yeah, it does. And there's a ton on the line, and there's a lot of pride between these two programs. We mentioned it, and I'm sure when we, from our pregame show on through the end, we'll probably mention it a bunch more times, but you got the last three national champions playing in this game. And so there's a lot of pride and a lot of tradition between these two programs. And so, I mean, I'm excited. I just don't know that you can really ask for a much better matchup for a regional championship. I mean, this is a national championship caliber game that's going to be played for the regional championship.
Of course, for those fans that do not know a whole lot about Harding, this is going to be contrasting styles to what the Bulldogs saw last week with Central Oklahoma. They did like to run the ball some, but they like to throw the ball. And, of course, Harding is kind of the opposite of we saw from the Broncos last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's about as significant a contrast as you're going to get. Central Oklahoma likes to kind of spread you out, use a lot of motion, and hit the slot receivers and their wide outs, and they like to drop back and pass. And Harding's the exact opposite. They're not going to pass it very often. They're going to really just keep running and running and running, and they're waiting on you to make that mistake because it could be 3 yards, 5 yards, 60 yards, and that's what Harding does really well. And so you have to be really disciplined. You have to be really focused for the entire game. But when they do throw, and they will throw it now and then, didn't throw it too much against Grand Valley. They will throw it now and then, and when they do, it's usually a situation where they can catch you sleeping and they can get a 50-yard touchdown pass.
Of course, I think both of these teams, if you look at it, the flip side, Ferris State, I'm not sure the Bulldogs have seen an offense kind of like Harding's this year. Bulldogs may not have played a defense as strong as Harding's over the course of this season. On the opposite side, I think the same could be said for Harding. I don't think they've seen an offense quite like we've seen Ferris State do here in this 11-game winning streak, and I'm not sure they've seen a defense kind of like the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I think, Harding is – one of the most underrated things about Harding is their defense, and they defend very well. And I think we kind of remember that a little bit from the two games that we played them. So they do play well traditionally defensively. So I think the Bulldogs there's going to be an adjustment for the Bulldogs in that respect. I think on the opposite end for the Bulldogs offensively, they're going to see a very tough, well-coached Harding defense. And the good thing about the Bulldogs offense is that when they get it going, they can get you coming and going. They can do running with a running back. They can do running with their slot receivers, running with the quarterback, but they can also throw that football really well downfield and make some plays and kind of hurt you and help spread you out and maybe open some things up for the running game. And so it's just a great matchup. And there's we could go on for probably an hour talking about this great matchup and how these two teams are going to come together at Top Taggart.
Of course, Harding guided by head coach Paul Simmons, who's done an outstanding job with that program, as has Tony Anise here at Ferris State. I think we'll talk more about the keys to the game in the pregame show, but I think it's important for the Bulldogs to get off to a great start coming up on Saturday and hopefully put some points on the board here early in this game.
Yeah, one thing you don't want to do is let Harding play with the lead because they are tough. When they get out on you and they get up 14 or 17 to nothing, and they can just keep pounding at you and pounding at you and pounding at you. You got to try to put Harding in a difficult position. And I think what you want to be able to do is to get up on them and get a lead, and you got to take care of the ball. You got to really take care of the ball and not turn the ball over because they can punish you. Good teams punish you, like the Bulldogs. We saw against Central Oklahoma. When you make a mistake, you turn the ball over, the Bulldogs were able to make people pay, and Harding will do much the same thing. So I think, you'll get a pretty good feel. I know we said that in 2018, and Harding made a great comeback against the Bulldogs, but Ferris State was able to hold on. But I think you'll have a pretty good feel, probably, if not early, or not late in the first quarter, but probably early in the second quarter. I think you'll start to get a good feel of how this game's going to go.
Of course, Ferris State and Harding last weekend, Ferris State really took care of the ball. The Bulldogs very disciplined in terms of the penalties. It's going to take a similar effort, I think, this Saturday.
Yeah, I think penalties and turnovers, are huge when you get in games like this with two evenly matched teams, two teams that are playing really hot right now, two teams that are playing well. And so, the Bulldogs, I mentioned, have been better in terms of keeping penalties down. And they got to take care of the ball. And I think the Bulldogs have been pretty solid for the most part, taking care of the ball. But you just want to really keep a little extra tighter grip because any turnover in a game with two great teams that are this evenly matched can make the difference.
Of course, we'll have all the action for you again right here on Sunny 97.3, online at ferrisstatebulldogs.com, starting with pregame coverage at noon on Saturday. It's a 1 p.m. kickoff. We'll have coverage for you on ESPN Plus with our video work produced by the Ferris State Television and Digital Media Production Program. If you're a student athlete, if you're a player, if you're a student or a fan, really can't beat what we expect to see on Saturday. Tremendous playoff game, maybe one of the biggest playoff games we've ever seen between Ferris State and Harding.
I think we're going to have some better temperatures. I think we're going to actually have a little warmer weather, hopefully. But I'll tell you what, this is one where you want to get your hat out and get your coat, maybe put a couple layers on like Coach Anise would, and get some warm pants. And this is one you want to see because this is going to be a good one. You get the last two national champions playing right here for the right to advance to the Final Four. I mean, this is a huge game. So I know it might be a little bit cold, but this is one you don't want to miss.
The Super Region 3 championship game, national quarterfinal matchup between Ferris State and Harding coming up on Saturday right here at Top Tiger Field. I'd like to thank Steve Masters at the Sunny 97.3 studios, along with all of our advertising partners for helping make this production possible, including Two Hats Ranch, our presenting sponsor. Thanks as well to Brody Kaiser for his production work right here on the Bulldog Sports Network. Sandy, can't wait. Saturday, huge matchup between Ferris State and Harding here with a right to move on to the national semifinals on the line.
I'm excited. I can hardly wait, and we know it's going to be a good one. We've played them twice in the past, and those were both games that came right down to the end, and I expect this one to be pretty similar.
Tickets for the game on sale now at ferrisstatebulldogs.com/tickets. Tune in Saturday as Ferris State takes on Harding. This has been the Bulldog Blitz Football Radio Show, presented by Two Hats Ranch.